Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today is Tuesday, February 6th, 2024. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. Yeah. Help support the show. You know what to do. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. We have 2 t-shirts, 2 ways to get them. The links are below. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership, you're going to get Fade to Black blend coffee in addition to your autographed t-shirt and all the other benefits that you get for becoming a Game Changer, an official Fade or Not. The links are below. Get your t-shirts today. Help support everything that we do around here in cold, wet, rainy, wintry, flooding, mudsliding, Southern California. All right. How you doing? Tonight on the show, Preston Dennett is with us. And lots to talk about with Preston. He's been researching the subject, UFOs, contact, abductions, for many, many decades. He has been, well, I'll let him reveal, but traditionally he's been a Southern California guy and, you know, in the neighborhood kind of thing. Excuse me. You know, here's, as I'm introing Preston, I want to let everybody know that I'm drinking coffee with chocolate in it. I'm drinking mochas because it's cold, it's wintry, it's freezing, it's raining, it's wet, right? It's cold. I've got thermals on. I've got long johns on. And it's too much for the throat. It's like really weird. So you may hear that tonight. So that's what's going on there. It's called chocolate in my coffee. But he's been at it here in Southern California. He's such a fixture of what is the UFO community here in Southern California. We're going to be getting into all of that in just a minute. I want to remind everybody that tomorrow night, Dr. Thomas Vallone is with us. We're going to be talking about Tesla. And Thursday night, Dr. Bruce Solheim is joining us. We're going to talk about ET and human integration. That's going to be an interesting show, too, as well. So we've got a big week coming up on Fade to Black. And then, of course, this weekend is the Conscious Life Expo. I'll be hosting and emceeing the event once again this year. So I'll see everybody over at the Conscious Life Expo. The links for that are below. I think our luncheon is sold out. But you can go and check on that. But I think that is sold out. I'm hosting all weekend long. So go to Conscious Life Expo, get your tickets. It's going down this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and PostCon is on Monday. So tickets and information, consciouslifeexpo.com. The links are below. But tonight, it's all about Preston Dennett. Now, I've titled this show tonight, UFOs at our drive-in theaters. Now, we're going to start there tonight because he has got over 100 documented cases and sightings of UFOs at our drive-in theaters. What the heck is going on? I do want to know. So we're going to do that and so much more. He began investigating UFOs and paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and co-workers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for MUFON. He's a ghost hunter, paranormal researcher. He has written over 30 books and more than 100 articles. He writes like a book a month. I think that 30 number is off. His website is below, Preston Dennett, and it's over on our website and throughout social media. I would like to welcome back to Faded Black, the one and only. He's right here, too. Check it out. There he is, Preston Dennett. Preston, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Doing really good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And, I kind of let it slip when I said, Southern California, you used to be. And so I'll leave that part up to you. But I actually want to start there if I can, Preston. You and I have known each other for a long time. We're neighbors. And but if we back this up, I've never talked to you about this before. But let's back up. Let's go on the Wayback Machine. And correct me if I'm wrong. But this is my memory. I remember sitting with some friends in like Woodland Hills, and somebody comes up to me with a flyer that they got like off of a telephone pole or something. And have you seen a UFO? And they were joking about it. I was like, let me see that. Right now, I look at the flyer, and that flyer was for you. This was like in the early 90s. Now, do I have the dating on that right? And were you posting flyers in the valley in that area back then?
Wow, that is a while ago. Yeah, that was the early 1992, actually.
That's right.
93. Yeah. I was posting flyers because there was a huge wave of sightings over my hometown, Topanga Canyon. I actually was originally from Illinois, but I grew up there in Topanga from, age 8 to 25 when I finally moved out. But in 1992, I'd moved out in 91 actually, but in 1992, there was a huge wave of sightings over the canyon. Police were receiving calls, the local newspaper, and I had written a previous article about UFOs in that area for the newspaper. And the editor, Colin Penno, called me up and asked me to investigate. And I started finding a lot of witnesses. It was a huge wave of sightings. I mean,
It was on the news. It was in the newspaper, and I remember all of that. And it was a crazy time for the valley. I've been in the valley for not quite as long as you, but almost. And that was a crazy period. And that area, let's talk about that for a second before we jump into the show. Topanga. For those that haven't been here in Southern California, Topanga Canyon, and it's the town of Topanga too. It goes from the valley. It's a road that goes up through the mountains and then dumps off on the other side at the Pacific Ocean in Malibu. But the canyon itself, which we affectionately, it's called Topanga Canyon and Topanga. It's known, its reputation is for hippies, right? Okay, so let's just
to a certain extent, yeah, that's true.
It is. It's a very artistic, upscale artistic, I should say. But it's very sparsely populated. You get to the center of town where the market is. Okay, all right, a few hundred people, I guess, but it is a long road and it is remote. It's a remote area of the valley, and if you're going to have UFO sightings, that's the place to have it. And it's just strange to have the hippie, awake, conscious community there, musicians. It's a very cool area, and I love it. But suddenly there were these UFO sightings there. And do you think that there's a connection between the community and ET?
I wonder about it. I can't say for sure, but I know for sure it is a huge hot spot. I documented well over 100 separate cases there. But from June 1992 to about 1994, it was super active, with cars being chased down the road, these craft landing over people's houses, hovering. I mean, it was nonstop. There was something going on there for sure. And it is a big wilderness area. It's actually one of the biggest inner city state parks in the entire world.
That's right.
Griffith Park, I think, argues that they're bigger, but Topanga State Park is pretty darn big. People get lost there.
It's remote. It's remote. It's remote. And for being so close to Los Angeles, and you know what's strange, and again, I want to explain this to everybody. When you go from the valley, which is lit up like a Christmas tree, it's packed, everything is built on. But when you hang that left or right, depending on what you're doing, off of Ventura Boulevard and head up Topanga Canyon Road, you immediately go from urban valley to forest and trees very, very, very quickly. And it's a winding road. And when you look to the left or the right as you're going up through the canyon, it's nothing but forest, right? In both directions. It gets remote. It's a very strange. It's so cut off from LA, and even the people in LA, we refer to Topanga as being remote. You know what I mean? It's like,
It's a little island of wilderness out there. You know, it wasn't unusual to see cougar and bobcat and fox and deer and raccoon, and all of that kind of stuff. Not so much now, but definitely there's still packs of coyotes running through the hills. It was a great area to grow up for sure. I mean,
back to that UFO flyer. What kind of responses did you get from that? Did you get a little bit of the crazy and then and serious? And especially back then, you know, this is before cell phones. So, what was the response to your UFO? Have you seen a UFO flyer?
Oh, it's tremendous. Far more than I expected. You know, I did call the police, and being a MUFON field investigator, they took my number. So I got some cases there, some through the newspaper. But yeah, I started posting this flyer everywhere because I was gung-ho. I was going to figure out what's going on. And every time I would post that flyer, I'd come back to check it. Somebody would have taken it. I'm like, who's taking my flyers? But I know a lot of people in the canyon, and I found out people started to tell me, you know, I saw your flyer hanging up on someone's wall, or, you know, someone else took it. It was funny. Yeah. So
I might have.
You know what happened to one of them there.
I might have that flyer somewhere in a box. But yeah, I was one of them. I just remember holding that thing, going, "What is going on?" But
a lot of calls from that flyer, quite a few.
Yeah. Now, how many books? Just really quick. I know I mentioned 30. How many books have you written now?
It's 31, about to be 32, and more in the works. Yep.
Right. And you've covered states, you've covered areas, you've covered specific geographic locations. If you were going to, with all of your research over the years, if you were going to have a hot spot or a personal favorite, where would that be?
Oh, well, Santa Monica Mountains, Topanga definitely is one of them. I think San Luis Valley in Colorado is a hugely active area. But, you know, the more you dig in any area, they've got a long history. It's just largely hidden. People don't talk about it. But I think it's pretty much, I mean, there are certainly areas across the U.S. which are more active. Upstate New York has a lot of activity. But there are UFO encounters everywhere. The more I dig, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny that you're on the show because we've known each other for a long time. You know where I live now. I'm in Palmdale, and so I'm going to keep this brief because the audience has heard this story many times now, but this will be the first time for you. So I'm looking at property right here in Palmdale, and I'm meeting my realtor, and I'm staying in a hotel. And so it was late at night. I was meeting my realtor like the next day at noon or something. And I wanted In-N-Out burger. It was like 10 o'clock at night. So It's like, I'm going to go in and out. So I go out and I'm walking over to my Jeep and I say to myself, Edwards is right there. So let's drive over to Edwards and then we'll go to In-N-Out. Your reward is In-N-Out, but let's go to Edwards first. So I jump in and I pull up my navigation and I see where Edwards is and I take off. I don't know where I'm at and it's dark. It's at night. And I'm following my GPS. And today I know every road here. I know the desert really, really well. But back then I didn't. And but so I'm following, and I see on the fence line to my left the no trespassing warning, restricted area signs, right? And they're like every 50 feet for miles. I was like, well, okay, I guess that's the edge of Edwards. Okay, no mistaking that. And I drive and I could see Edwards lit up, so off in the desert. So I pull over on the side of the road, and Preston, as I live and breathe, this is what happens. I park my Jeep. I go across. What I didn't know then was I was in the middle of the desert. There's nothing out there. There's absolutely nothing. And I'm looking. I cross the street. I'm looking at Edwards, and it's lit up off in the distance. And I'm just kind of standing there, and I got my cell phone in my right hand. And I'm like, oh, there's Edwards. Right as I say that, like 10 degrees up, 20 degrees up, like in the black sky, this gray static, like on a TV, starts to light up. I was like, what is that? Right. And I just kind of look at it. And right at it, this is all very quick. And as I'm looking at it, it was like black and white static on a TV. Slowly lighting up, and then it lights up, and then this ring of lights on the bottom goes black, just like that. And I was like, what? No, really? I'm standing there, and it's like a minute later, not very long, and I'm just looking, and it does it again. It slowly lights up, goes bright, black. And I get out my cell phone, I get the video ready, and I stand there, nothing. I stand there for like 20 minutes. So I jump in my Jeep, and I'm driving to In-N-Out to go get my burger. And I wasn't thinking UFO. I believe it or not. I was thinking it was a light on the top of a tower for the planes, or I wasn't quite going there. The next day, I didn't want to freak myself out, but the next day, as I get up, I have breakfast, and I come out of the hotel. I'm meeting my realtor in a couple hours, and I look over, and I'm like, man, there's Edwards. Let's go back. So now I drive. I got my GPS. I go back to that spot. I see my tire tracks. I pull over. I go across the street. I see my footprints in the ground, right? and I look up, and I'm looking at, and where I thought there was like a tower, it was just blue sky with the mountains behind it. And I'm just like, what? Okay. What did I see? Now, I don't know. I'm not saying it's ET. It's Edwards. It could be anything. But that's where I live now. And that's Southern California. And that's the stuff that not only goes on out here in Palmdale, its reputation is there. We all know that. But man, I was like, man, I can't wait to get my house. This is where I want to be. But sightings like that, you've had the same thing. You had that crazy thing over near JPL, right? Near NASA.
That's right. Yeah. Contactee took me out, and I had one of my best sightings ever. So, but Edwards, man, oh man, Jimmy, I mean, that's UFO Central. I'm sure people have no idea how much activity goes on there. It's a UFO magnet and has been since 1947 onwards.
Yeah. The reports, the official stuff from the Air Force, there's like a lot of pretty crazy stuff that has gone on. It used to be called what did they call it? Maroc Army Airfield because of the dry lake bed. And all of the breaking of the sound barrier and Chuck Yeager and all of that experimental stuff, the SR-71, all that stuff was here. This is what this area was built for. So it makes sense to me, doesn't it, that ET would have a huge interest in our current technology, and if we retrieved a craft and backwards engineered it, this is where it would get done. This is where all the technology is, right?
Oh, yeah. There's many reports of that. Shoot, I interviewed a guy firsthand who was a subcontractor, went to Edwards, looked in a hangar, because he heard this buzzing noise, and there was a UFO hovering off the ground. Little flying saucer, perfectly shiny silver. He turns to his employer and says, "What the heck is that?" His employer puts his finger to his lips and says, "I'm not talking about that." And long story short, a year later, he finally got the answer as to what that was. His employer needed him for another job, and he wouldn't do it unless his employer basically spilled the beans. And he did. And he said, what you saw was not a UFO. It was a reverse engineered from ET technology based on counter-rotating magnets, which create a magnetic field outside the craft and propels it in the desired direction. But yeah, I mean, that's one of many cases of whistleblowers out of that area. I mean, that's where Gordon Cooper, astronaut, saw he didn't see it, but he saw the film of a UFO landed right there on the runway. Of course, the famous Eisenhower alleged meeting with ETs. 1965, a huge case with radar confirmation. That's absolutely undeniable. I mean, it just goes on and on when it comes to Edwards.
Yeah, it's nuts. I was walking out of, I'll share this with you. This is a funny story. I'm coming out of Best Buy, and I've got a shopping cart with something big in it, right? I'm coming out of Best Buy, and I hear from it behind me, fade to black, right? And I stop, and I turn, and the guy goes, "Whoa, man, it is you. I heard you lived in Palmdale." I said, I do. He goes, "Man, I got a Jeep too." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Dude, here's your fade to black Jeep." I said, "Yeah, it's right here." And he goes, "There's mine." He was parked next to me. So, and he goes, "Man, you got a minute?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, well, "I grew up here." He said, during the 90s in high school, for the entire year, they were test flying these black hexagon flying saucers. I said, "What? Where?" All day long, and they were quiet. I said, "How big were they?" And he goes, "From here to the building to Best Buy," which was like 50, 60, 70 feet. I don't know. It was big. And he said, "Man, we would just be out there in the playground, man. Just these things. That's what." I said, "Really?" And then they just stopped. And I remember I got in the car and I called Dolan right away. And I said, "Dolan, I just talked to somebody." And I said, "Have you ever heard of a hexagon-shaped silent craft?" And he said, "No, I haven't." I told him the whole story, and you, just like myself, we talked to everybody. I had never heard anything like that before. Have you gotten any reports out of this area of a stop sign, hexagon-shaped, flat, 70-foot silent anti-gravitic craft being flown?
No, not specifically that. UFOs come in all different shapes and sizes.
Right.
And some of them we know are reverse engineered. I mean, the more you dig into it, it's clear that is going on. But most of the cases I get are your classic saucer or egg-shaped, perhaps, or cigar-shaped. Spheres do turn up. I don't think I've ever gotten a hexagon, no.
Yeah. And I'm going to move on to drive-in theaters, but here's the other thing about Palmdale, and I know that they're listening right now, so I'm going to keep this sort of clean. That everybody here works for somebody. right? You have everything here: Northrop Grumman, you have NASA, you have Air Force Plant 42, you have Skunk Works, you have Edwards, and a bunch of other companies that are here. And so everybody's in the biz. And this was, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, but this is so typical of this area. I'm driving down the road and I see a black commercial type airliner. Okay, it's big, but it's flying over Palmdale at like treetop level, right? And I'm watching it, and I see it. I'm at the stoplight, and I watch this guy go out around, like over my house, the west side of Palmdale, takes a turn. It's got the plane sideways, dude. I mean, the wingtips are clipping swing sets at the playground, right? It's like that, really. And takes this wide sweeping turn, levels out, and goes back across. Now, in any other city, 911, right? The phone calls, the complaint, but not here in Palmdale. It's like just any other day. It's what they do. So if you're going to have some kind of hexagon thing being test flown here, nobody's going to report that. Nobody. It's something that people are working on. And that's what's crazy about this area. I find that part extremely fast. Right now, the X-59, the new supersonic silent, right? It's going to have no sonic booms. The X-59 is done. They are getting ready to start flying like this month. They're doing all of the runway tests right now. So I'm going to be watching this thing flying over Palmdale. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures of it, but that thing is a crazy looking aircraft. It's really long. It's like a needle, right? It's like a needle with wings on it. It's very long and thin. But we're going to see that. And I wonder, in the press release that was done last month, they said that they were going to test fly it over American cities in the U.S., to test its silence, right? Now, what are people going to report? Right? A needle flying.
That ought to be interesting. I'm sure it's going to generate some UFO reports. But let's face it, most people don't even report it, a sighting anyway. I would say I'll be generous and say 1 in 10, but it's closer to 1 in 50, 1 in 100. Report it to MUFON or the police or the Air Force. I always ask people when I interview them, did you call MUFON? And usually the answer is, what's MUFON? So no, most people don't even report it anyway.
Do you report your own sightings?
I should, but no, I haven't. But I do talk about them. I'm not shy about talking about it. I haven't reported it to any official UFO, NUFORC or anything like that. No.
Yeah, I've never done that either. I've called MUFON and said, okay, I've just seen something, but I've never done the official. I've never done an official report. I never have, and I probably should have, because I ask people to do it too. And it's the first question, just like you. Have you, right? Did you call it in? Did you report it? No. Well, yeah, you're probably right. It might be like 1 in 200. Yeah. Who knows? Which
means, because MUFON and NUFORC, they're getting 10, 20 reports a day. You can times that by 10 easy, right? But probably closer to 100, which means, how active is our UFOs? It's a lot more than I think we hear about.
Yeah, for sure. Now back to the show tonight. It's titled UFOs at Our Drive-In Theaters. I love that. It's such a slice of Americana. I miss the drive. What was the drive-in that was over near Northridge by Budweiser? What was that drive-in theater called?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I think I probably went to it, though I was probably put in the safety seat or stuffed under the seat so we could get in a little more cheaply. And I had a big family, 6 kids, so they would just put us little ones under the seat, and we would go.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that drive-in. Northridge Drive-In? What's it called? The Northridge Drive-In? But anyway,
multiple screens, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They had like 3. Yeah, that's right. What for you? What triggered this idea to go and look into this a little bit deeper?
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because, I've been in this field for a pretty long time, and it kind of slipped under the radar for me, certainly. And I think really for just about everybody in terms of UFO research. But it really started for me when one lady came to work at the office where I did, data entry and accounting. Her name is Claudia, and she found out I was a UFO researcher. And she says, I have this story for you. Back when I was about 6 years old in 1972, she and her family went to visit the Paramount drive-in in Paramount. It's got 2 screens. It's a huge drive-in. And she said she was just sitting there in the back seat of the VW Beetle next to her sister and her 2 parents when she noticed her parents were just kind of staring ahead dumbly, not really watching the movie. And she looked to the side and she saw people in a panic, dropping their popcorn and drinks, getting into their cars, driving off. Remember those little speakers they would attach? They were just driving off without even, detaching them.
Wow.
And so she looks out the window, and there, right to the right of the screen, mind you, below the level of the top of the screen, is a craft. It's a classic flying saucer. She said it looked like a silver spoon, chrome, really shiny, no real markings on it, but it was big. It covered about half the width of the screen. So that's 50 feet and maybe 20, 30 feet up, if that, below the level of the screen, just sitting there watching everyone watch the movie is how she put it. And she could hear it. It was making a low whooshing noise. And everyone was just in a complete panic, vacating the premises. I'm like, wow, I never heard of anything like this. I thought this was a one-off, honestly, just a unique.
Did you say it was shaped like a spoon?
No, it had the texture, the color.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Like chrome, like bright, shiny silver, almost mirror-like, she said. But there's weird aspect to this particular sighting because I asked her, how did this end? And she gave me this look like, no, I don't remember. In fact, she didn't remember the sighting at all for a couple of years until she and her mom were in the kitchen listening to a call-in radio show. And some guy calls in and starts saying, I was at the Paramount drive-in. This movie was playing. Suddenly this UFO appears right to the right of the screen. People were in a panic. Claudia turns to her mom and is like, I think we were there, weren't we? And her mom's like, yeah, we were. I do remember that. And they both were really puzzled about why they had forgotten about it, completely left their mind. They never talked about it until that day when they heard this other guy who was there reporting the same thing. And this turns up in some of the cases I found. But that was the first case I heard, and I kind of just ignored it. I mean, I didn't ignore it. I thought it was a great case, but I didn't connect the dots until when this was shocking to me. I was writing UFOs over Colorado. And by that point, I had written about New York and California and a couple of other states. And I'd run into a few other drive-in theater encounters, but didn't make much of it. But as I'm putting together this book, I ran into 3 cases in a row. I mean, I'll never forget it. One guy was at the Mile High Theater in Denver watching Dr. Zhivago. A UFO shows up. Another case, the UFO.
Stop right there. Colorado, Dr. Zhivago. So if that was first run, Zhivago, that was 60s, early 70s?
I'd have to look up the date on that one. But yeah, that was really the heyday. The 60s and the 70s was when this ramped up big time.
What did he see? What was his description of the craft?
It was just your typical flying saucer. But there was another one right after that, which, gosh, that was, I have the notes here. That was in Boulder, Colorado, July 1976. And this was the one that really caught my attention because it was a classic domed disc. There were like 200 people there. It was right overhead, and it started flashing lights that were so bright, people couldn't even make out the actual shape of it. And what was really interesting is other people started turning on their headlights and flashing back at it and honking their horn. And there was a little bit of this two-way communication. And then when I heard a third case, I thought, I wonder if this is a thing.
What was the movie playing in Boulder? Do you have that note?
No.
Everybody is going to be asking, so what movie was playing? So, but we know one was Dr. Zhivago.
I looked into that. I did. I'm like, let's analyze the movies, because most people don't remember. They're like, I don't remember. What I remember is the sighting, because that was the real show. But I did make a list of all the people who did remember, and it was across the board. Let's see, Exorcist, Jurassic Park, The Simpsons movie, Outlaw Josie Wales. I mean, it's all different types. One was one of the James Bond movies.
Dr. No.
One of those, yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't find any connection to the movie in terms of, maybe the ETs are coming down to watch a movie or something. I don't think that's what's going on, because once you get to the cases.
Right. I'm just going to share this really quick. When I think of drive-ins, okay, and I cannot believe, looking back, I cannot believe that this went down. I'm probably 10 or 11 years old. So this would have been 74, 75, like right in there. I go with my friend Jeff and his parents to the Pendleton Pike Drive-In in Indianapolis, where we watched The Last House on the Left, the original. Okay, what the heck? That movie. So I remember being so terrified and so traumatized from that movie. I can't watch that movie today as an adult. It's just like, it's so incorrect. It's just unbelievably. Anyway, that a parent would take two 11-year-old boys to see that movie, and it just traumatized me for the rest of my life. I wish a UFO would have shown up during that, so I didn't have to watch the movie. It just traumatized me. Okay, you said that there were 3, so that was 2. What was the third one that caught your attention?
Oh, I don't remember the specific details of it, but that's when I decided, I'm going to take a deeper look. And I've, at that point, had a library of several hundred books and started going through them. And I found almost none. I found one in Ryan Sprague's book. I forget what it's called, Beyond the Skies or something like that. So shout out to Ryan Sprague, because he did have one. But then I started digging into the UFO databases like NUFORC and MUFON and APRO. And I found some, but the real gold mine was in the UFO News Clipping Service and UFO News Clippings. And I started to hit gold over and over again with these cases that had slipped under the radar and were really reported only in local newspapers. And it wasn't just a few. I mean, it took me a good year of research to dig up what I found. But I found well over 100. And I'm still getting new cases. And I was able to, I put a shout out on social media for other people who had possibly had an experience like this. I got a huge response from that. So this is absolutely a thing. The earliest cases I got started around 1950, but moved upwards. 1960s and 70s was the real heyday for encounters of this kind. It tapered off in the 80s when drive-in theaters really started to, the whole industry collapsed, really, due to home movies and stuff. But I still have recent cases. But it's crazy what's going on here. Here, let me just tell you one of my favorite cases, which was at the Terrace DriveIn in Bakersfield. This was in August 12, 1952. It's a pretty big theater. 650 cars can fit there. I looked it up. You can look up all of this stuff. And there happened to be a military officer in the audience when this UFO shows up. And it was cylindrical. It drops down out of the sky, hovers right over the screen. This is what they always do. It's either over the screen or to either side. And they'll put on a show. They'll release smaller craft. They'll flash their lights. They'll dart around. They'll do something, what UFO researchers call a display. I'm sure you've heard that term before. They will put on a little show. And it did. It turned on its side and flashed all its lights at the audience and took off. This, statistically speaking, was a really brief sighting, because often it'll last for 20 minutes. This was just momentary, and off it went. So people start calling the theater, they start calling the sheriff's office. Sheriff Leroy Hatfield was fielding all these calls from people who had been there. And finally he's like, you know what? The phone kept ringing. Hang up. I'm going to just go over there and I'll talk to you in person. And there's still 100 people there. The movie's long over, and they all want to tell him. He interviews about 30 of them and tells the rest, go home. I know what you saw. I've got my notes here. I will report it to the Air Force. And so he does. And of course, Edwards, being the closest to Air Force Base, is who he reports it to. And this is really interesting because you can look this up online through declassified documents. They took his report very seriously. They wrote it up in a report marked action and sent it, get this, the very next day to the head of commanding general at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, Jimmy, you know about Wright-Patterson. That's where they do all the studying of foreign technology of any kind, and absolutely UFOs. But it didn't stop there. This report was also sent to the head of intelligence in Washington, D.C., and to Ent Air Force Base in Colorado, where, of course, we track all the incoming and outgoing traffic. So this was a report that's very early. It's one of several that had that same pattern being sent to these places of intelligence. So we know from the beginning that they knew what was going on. And Blue Book would label these as, balloon or weather inversion or, shooting star. Not one of these cases ever made it to Blue Book's unidentified list. They would just not talk about it or cover it up or refuse to investigate it.
What's interesting, especially about any one of these cases, but you would typically have hundreds of witnesses all at one location at one time. Bakersfield, which if anybody needs to understand, Bakersfield is the next major city next to Palmdale, up the road a piece in the desert, probably 50, 60 miles from Palmdale, I'm guessing, and the same distance from Edwards. But it's a major city. And to have that many witnesses at the same time, and including, like you said, there was a member of the military there, the sheriff is going to show up. He's got hundreds of witness reports to follow up on. He's got all the witnesses he needs. That's what's incredible about this, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's nothing like this out there in the literature. Believe me, I looked, because there are some scattered reports of UFOs over sporting events. There was one at a soccer match in Italy that some 10, 20,000 people saw. And at football games here and there, or outdoor concerts. But I couldn't find anywhere near the numbers that I was finding at drive-in theaters. The only other parallel there was schoolyard encounters.
Right. And I wanted to circle back to that because I do find that there's a strange connection for me there. But now, ultimately, I want to move through some more cases here. That's 1952. And what's your idea as you've looked at all of this? Because I'm picturing, E.T. looking above ground. He's seeing the screens lit up. He's seeing the activity, they. And so it would be something of interest to E.T., isn't it? It's like it's glowing in the dark.
Exactly. Huge beams of light, all these cars gathering. And if you look at, an aerial view of a drive-in theater, it's visible from very, very high up.
Totally.
The screen, that's huge. It's clearly going to attract attention from someone high up. And that was kind of my first theory as to what's going on. Are they watching the movie? No, they're not watching the movie, because in the vast majority of these cases, they are above the screen or to either side, not behind it, where all the audience is. They're showing themselves to the audience.
They're saying hello. They're saying
100%. You can label this as a close encounter of the first kind, most, a simple sighting. Some are actually close encounter of the second kind, because they will short out the movie or affect electronics in some way. But really, every single one of these cases could be more accurately labeled as this blew me away when I thought about it, close encounter of the fifth kind. Because in essence, it's the theater that is provoking this sighting. It's a CE5. You're drawing them in from these huge bright lights and crowds of people. I don't know, something's drawing them in. My assessment is that ultimately they're doing this as part of a vigorous publicity campaign to announce their presence. Because what better way? You have a captive audience. There's a minimum of 100 people there. It's usually closer to 500. And you can put on a show. And this is something that happens all across the United States, with scattered cases in Canada. It's basically confined to the US, though I did find other cases. And it's pretty clear to me that that's what they're doing, because some of these cases really speak to that. There was a case at Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where the UFOs kept showing up over the drive-in theater so much that the theater owners put it in their advertisement. Want to see a UFO? Come to the theater. Because it was happening over and over again. This is crazy when you think about it. And some of these encounters have had weirdly influential consequences.
Like what?
This one case in the Skyline Theater in, where was this? St. Louis, Missouri. This was on July 17, 1954. And this UFO shows up. There's an airport fairly close by. Turns out people in the control tower were watching it with binoculars. But everyone in the theater saw this object, which in this case kind of hovered next to the parking lot, which is pretty unusual. Usually it's right over the screen. A huge red oval object lit up the entire parking lot in red light, this eerie red light. People got out of their cars. No one's watching the movie. That's normal. People completely stop watching. They'll turn off the movie in some of these cases because no one's watching it. So they're getting out of their cars, staring at it, and it's hovering there for a good 5 or 10 minutes until finally some people start running towards it, at which point it does lift up and take off. Well, it turns out one of the witnesses, and where I got this report, was from a little kid named Peter, who never forgot what he saw. It got him really interested in UFOs, and later he followed the field, became something of a researcher, an enthusiast certainly, but was friends with Bob Gribble, who ran the National UFO Reporting Center. And Bob Gribble's got to the point where he couldn't do it anymore.
Are you telling me that was Peter Davenport?
I'm telling you, it's Peter Davenport. Yep.
Get out of Dodge.
Can you believe that? That makes me wonder. I don't know if ETs can predict the future to that extent, but it's a remarkable synchronicity that here they are showing themselves off to someone who's going to have a huge influence on the UFO field. Playing a vital role in publicizing this subject.
Now, I remember Peter telling me this story. I didn't realize, maybe he mentioned it, that it was a drive-in theater. I do remember him saying that the object was being tracked by the local airport from the tower with their binoculars, and that this lasted for quite a while, and that he ran out and looked up at it. But Did you interview Peter and ask him about this event?
No, I saw an interview with him about it. And
Right.
his father was actually one of the people at the control tower.
Right. I remember all of this now. Right. So that was at a drive-in theater.
Yep, St. Louis, Missouri.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. What year was that?
That was 54. Yeah, 1954.
Yeah, Peter's getting up there. So that's 52, and that's 54. The Peter Davenport connection is absolutely. You're right about predicting the future, right? That his whole path was set at that point. But what in this time period, I wanted to circle back to this. In Richard Dolan's book, UFOs and the National Security State, and J. Allen Hynek's book, The Report on UFOs, they talk about this time period extensively in both books. There's no mention of Bakersfield in 1952. I can pretty much say that. You would think that if this went up the chain of command, the 1952 Bakersfield, and it goes to Wright Pat, where Blue Book is, it makes it to D.C., it goes out to Edwards, that Hynek and the team would have been out here and did an investigation. Why and how do you explain that got so far under the radar, literally, that it got away from Dolan, it got away from Hynek? Why do you think that a sighting of that significance, how does it get hidden?
Yeah, I wish I could give you a definitive answer other than I think it was deliberate. This UFO cover-up is no joke, and we know from Hynek's own statements that Project Blue Book wasn't really a legitimate investigative body. Any cases that had multiple witnesses or any physical evidence at all was suppressed, and they would pursue cases which were obviously, conventional objects or prosaic explanations. So I think that's one of the reasons. I can't tell you for sure, but I can tell you, you can look this up and verify it yourself. This is absolutely something that's been going on for a very long time. Like I said, the earliest case I found was 1950, which, by the way, I think not coincidentally, coincides exactly with the schoolyard encounters, which I also have over 100 cases of and wrote a completely separate book on.
Right. We'll do that. What was the case in 1950? So we did 52. We just did 54. What was the case in 1950?
I found one at the Starlight Drive-In. This was in Spartanburg, North Carolina.
Okay.
And these early cases really only got attention because there were professional people in the audience. Usually a military officer, but in this case it was a journalist by the name of Vernon Gwyn, who was there and saw this UFO, which he described as looking like a dirigible, kind of silver or white, very large, very low. And it kept coming over the theater to the point, it was deliberate, clearly. This is not people parked out outside at night and seeing something fly by. In each of these cases, these objects are coming for the theater and stopping and circling it or putting on some sort of display. So this thing was going by it 3 or 4 times. And he ended up writing a report to the Air Force. And this was, again, sent to, the predecessor of Blue Book, not Blue Book itself, Sign and Grudge.
Right.
It went to the commanding general at Wright-Patterson. I found the documents on these. These are all declassified. So that's the earliest case I could find. But I found this really interesting pattern because these sightings would go from theater to theater to theater. Could be all the way on the other side of the U.S. or the next state over or the next city over. But each year there would be 2 or 3 high-quality cases in very much the way I think, say, a musician perhaps does a concert tour or an author does a book tour, basically publicizing their book or their song, but the ETs are publicizing their presence I really think that's what the agenda is going on here, because we don't have cases of people being, taken on board or anything like that. These are, for the most part, simple sightings. Though some humanoids are seen through the portholes looking down at people. That does turn up in a few cases. But yeah, very early cases and regular, pretty much year after year after year. But man, oh man, in the 1960s, that's when things got exciting. I mean,
Okay, we're gonna take a break here. I want for the audience, we all know about Blue Book, but leading up to Project Blue Book and its formation was Project Grudge and Project Sign, which were the two official. It was the same. It was Blue Book by a different name. And they did that, and they changed the name 3 times because the last name was Blue Book. But that's what Grudge. So when you hear us mention Project Grudge, that was an earlier version of Blue Book, and the same thing with Project Sign. Those were the predecessor, the names of Project Blue Book before Blue Book became Blue Book. So when you hear us mention Grudge or Sign, now you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think of the name Project Grudge, that kind of says a lot. It's such a shame.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, both of them. I thought both names were. Is ironic the right word to use? Kind of. But those names always made sense to me.
Right.
I always thought Blue Book was the mysterious name, right? That just didn't make any sense. But Grudge and Sign were perfect.
We know the better cases were bypassed Blue Book and were sent to the ATIC, Air Technical Intelligence Command. So they didn't even get the best cases. It was just a publicity front to handle all the calls coming in, which it wasn't a true investigative body. It just wasn't.
Right. I talked to Paul Hynek about his dad last year. I got really wrapped up in Jay Allen's book, The Report on UFOs. And because he wrote that book in 1977, and when you read the book, and I know that you have, but when you read the book, it was 2 things. It was an apology to the public from Jay Allen, and second, he was pissed off. He was angry. And you could see both sides of that in the book, that he felt that he didn't do enough to push the science side of it. You could definitely tell that he had changed his position on the phenomena, and he was very angry at being used by the Air Force in the capacity that he was for Blue Book, that he was a tool. And it's a crazy read. And he breaks down cases in the book. This is 1977. To him, represented exactly what the phenomena was. And he was pretty angry. Yeah, the best stuff.
He's a hero. I mean, he's a hero in this field. We wouldn't be where we are today. I do remember Dr. James McDonald was one of another few scientists at that era. I read about how he really urged Hynek to take a tougher stance on the Air Force, because no one was really looking into this who had a scientific background at that time. It was Hynek, it was Dr. McDonald, it was Dr. Leo Sprinkle, just a few people.
Yeah, Don Kehoe. Yeah, and you're right about James McDonald too, as well. Before we take our break, there are a handful of people that we need to thank, number one, and number two, they deserve to be where we are in 2024, to be a part of what is going on today. Hynek deserves that. James McDonald deserves that. Stringfield deserves that. Kehoe, deserves. They need to be a part of this right now, today. because you and I talking about this and where we are with DC and the military and the media, it's never been like this before. And I you know, Stanton Friedman, Stanton.
Right.
Stanton, he must be laughing right now, but they deserve that, and they're not here. So you're absolutely right. We do stand on the shoulders of giants, and they worked so hard. If you think about how angry Donald Kehoe was, right? How angry James McDonald was, pushing against the forces of the Pentagon and Washington, D.C., and fighting the fight that they did for years and years and years. It's just absolutely incredible. Today, we think, Preston, that we're doing, think about what kind of force they were up against back then. That was a whole different world. Today, we're doing what we're doing, but those guys were really fighting.
Yeah, I mean, back when I got involved in this field in 1986, there wasn't even a whole lot of literature on this subject. I mean, there was some books, but not like today. It wasn't on TV, really, not in any serious way. The ridicule factor was far more intense back then. The debunkers were out there in full force. These guys were swimming upstream for sure. I mean,
completely.
Yeah.
Let's take our break right here. When we come back tonight, it's Preston Dennett and UFOs over our drive-in theaters. And I know. It's like insert joke here. This is very serious stuff. And so when we come back, Preston says in the 60s, things started to heat up. We'll come back after the break and get to some of his favorite incidents over our drive-in theaters. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now.
My job is not to preach. My job is to take you on this journey.
In a state of passion, nothing negative can happen.
That it's the moons of those planets that would have life.
Sometimes I see, these energies also in your field.
It is our passion and our pleasure.
Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest, Matt LaCroix. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's fade to black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's lax, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership for a limited time, you will get Fade to Black Blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. That's right. We have 2 t-shirts. We have the original, the classic Fade to Black t-shirt. You know you want one. Post a picture, send it to us. We'll put it in our Fade to Black gallery. And we've got the new official Fade to Black t-shirt drawn by Michael Oming. 2 t-shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get yours today. Everything is in stock. Everything gets autographed. Everything includes shipping. And you're going to get a tracking number. And with the Game Changer membership, you get an email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads of the show. Those are uploaded every single night after the show to the website. So don't delay. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, and Preston Dennett is here. We're talking about UFOs over our drive-in theaters. Yeah, this is great. And as I bring you back, Preston, when after a case like 1952 in Bakersfield, the Peter Davenport in St. Louis, that's absolutely incredible. But for you to turn around and say in the 60s is when things started to heat up, I kind of freak out a little bit. Take us through it. What happened in the 60s? Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Hold on, Preston. Okay, you got to unmute. Okay, I got you.
All right.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, the 50s was pretty interesting, but honestly, it's like the pre-show to what really is going on because it ramped up in a big, big way. I would say the first really major case that caught my attention that really proved to me what's going on here comes from investigator George Fawcett, who's really well respected in this field. He's huge, another one of those early investigators who I think is very well respected. But he investigated this case and interviewed multiple witnesses, by the way, at the Wellington Circle Twin. This is in Medford, Massachusetts, in May of 1963, where these UFOs showed up. First it was two, came down and hovered next to the parking lot, and they raised up, and two more came down and slid right under them. So now you have 4 discs and 2 columns. Seconds later, moments later, 2 more come, slide under the other 2. So now you have 3 discs and 2 columns. And then 2 more came. So now you have 8 discs hovering there. And now for the next, get this, 45 minutes, these discs put on a show. They did this sort of musical chairs rotating dance. I think that's the best way to put it, where they made it very clear that this was absolutely unconventional aircraft. I mean, these are not distant lights in the sky. The vast majority of these cases are solid, metallic, saucer-shaped craft. And 45 minutes is a long time.
That's one of the most incredible things I've ever heard when it comes to UFO sightings. Okay, so do you have more information on this? And what did the local media say about it?
This got only into the local papers, and that's it. So they didn't really say anything. These are just reported in locally only. They don't ever really reach national headlines. And a lot of these cases are very brief because newspaper reporting wasn't, official investigative body. This case was officially investigated by an experienced researcher, which I think definitely gives it a higher level of credibility. But I don't know a whole lot about a lot of these cases. And what's super interesting is, there may be 100 or 200 or more people there, but usually it's only 1 or 2 people who come forth. And that's one of just a handful of cases where there are multiple witnesses to support an account. But it was definitely the start of something big, because year after year, these cases started to get really dramatic. It was
keep going. You've got my attention, Preston.
Yeah, I mean, the very next year, May, let's see here, I think this was June 29th, 1964, at a theater in Atlanta, Georgia. And this came from either MUFON or NUFORC, a single witness, anonymous, so not investigated, but certainly a first-hand report. And he describes how, as a little kid, he was with his family at this theater, which is not named, but they had bleachers at this particular theater and cars in the parking lot, and all the kids would sit up on the bleachers. And the bleachers were filled with kids, and one of the kids jumps up and says, "Hey, did you see that? A UFO just flew by." And everyone turned and looked, and there was nothing there, and they thought he was kidding. But moments later, this UFO reappears, and it's coming, like they always do, directly for the theater, targeting it. Again, not a simple flyby of seeing something at night. I discarded about 50 cases of those because that was just a random sighting. These are very low level. And in fact, this thing came so low right over the bleachers that it caused complete panic. All the kids scattered. The witness who made the report ran into the snack stand with his cousin and hid there, trying to find his parents through all this pandemonium. Finally peeked out, and this craft was right overhead. And he estimates it was about 30 feet in diameter. It ended up pretty much clearing the theater in this case. In some cases, people don't react that way. It's very friendly and sometimes interactive even. But sometimes no. People go into this absolute panic. And he finally located his family, and off they went. And they don't know what happened from that point on because they left. But this is where I got a number of good reports, is from places like MUFON or NUFORC or APRO in particular, those 3.
Any reports of missing time or abductions tied in with any of these cases?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can say that. There is some memory problems, like that case with Paramount, California, with my coworker Claudia. I wonder about it. And I did interview a witness firsthand whose account did appear in Ryan Sprague's book, Somewhere in the Skies. But I located him and he agreed to give an interview. And I wonder about his case, which occurred, it was sometime later in 1974, August, at the Ascot Park Drive-In. And he was there with a friend watching a movie when suddenly this enormous black kind of boomerang-shaped craft approaches from behind the theater, from behind the screen rather, coming towards the audience, comes over the theater. This was right when the movie had just begun. There were cars still coming in. And as soon as it hits the level of the theater, the screen blacks out, all the lights go off, all the cars coming in, their headlights go out, all the engines stop. He, Scott Santa, jumps out with his friend, and they're looking at this thing, and everything came into that, the Oz factor, that eerie silence that we hear about. He says his ears popped. He couldn't hear a noise so much as felt this deep thrumming noise.
Right.
And this gets so strange because this object is as wide as the theater itself. It's a huge object, just goes right overhead and over everyone's head and moves on and disappears off in the distance, at which point, like a switch being flipped, the movie starts playing again. The lights go on, the snack stand, the cars, they continue driving in. He gets back in his car, sits down, and starts watching the movie, completely forgets it. Everyone there completely forgot what happened. There was no reaction, no talking, nothing. And it wasn't really until a year later that he went into a bookstore and saw Ed Ruppelt's book, UFOs, with the word UFO on it, on the UFO Report, I think it was called. But saw that word, and that's what I call a cue or a trigger, which I see with contactee cases all the time. They'll see a bright light or see the word UFO or see a Whitley Strieber's drawing on communion, and it brings back the memory. So I think probably in his case, it's entirely possible that there was a mass onboard experience, perhaps. He has no memory of this, on being on board or anything like that. But let's face it, that sounds like missing time to me.
Yeah, I know Scott, and I didn't know that he had this sighting. Wow, that's absolutely incredible. And talk about missing time. I want to move on to some other cases from the 60s, but I'll say this. I had you've been to my house, right? Okay, so I'm having a dinner party, and one of the guests was a friend of mine that I went to high school with. He was the drummer in our high school band in Panama, in Central America, right? But he happens to live here in Los Angeles now. So he comes out. His name's Javier, and I hadn't seen him since I was a kid. So we're sitting out there. Jason Martell's there, okay, and some other friends. There was about 8 or 10 of us, and Javier goes, "Hey, man, you remember that flying saucer we saw in Panama?" I go, "What? What are you talking about?" He goes, "Man, so it was me, it was you, it was Bill, it was Rocky, our group, of friends, and you saw it first." I go, "What the hell are you talking about?" He goes, "Man, and we all looked up, and there it was, and it had lights around it, and it was right above us, and you were freaking." I go, "Dude, are you sure it was me? Are you sure it was me?" And he goes, "Man," and he tells the whole story, and we get one of our friends on the phone from back then, and who remembered it too as well. I don't remember it. And I've tried, Preston, I swear, I've tried to like put myself in this spot and but I can't. I cannot remember this. And he swears that this, and I do not remember it.
Red flag, Jimmy, red flag. Just saying.
Maybe I was abducted. But it's like really strange. So when people say something like this, and Scott's a cool dude, he's spot on the money. But when people say this, we shouldn't dismiss it at all. These reports happen over and over again, and I've got my little thing where I'm scratching my head, going, I don't remember this event, but I've got friends that swear that I was the one that saw it and they were there, but I don't remember it.
Well, I know what it's like. I've interviewed people who've had this, but I had my own experience with an orb coming down in front of my car and then shooting straight up. And I don't remember what happened after that, but I didn't remember the experience for 3 months. And suddenly it just popped back into my head. Like, this happened. I'm sticking to my guns with this. I know this happened. I remember it vividly. But yeah, I completely forgot about it for months.
Somebody just said, Dennis, actually being abducted would be as popular as it would get for me. What? Okay, so let's get back to the drive-ins here. What happens next what's the next big case in the 60s?
Yeah, well, this is when I started to really wonder, is this intentional? Because, I mean, clearly it is. They're targeting the theaters. But then I heard about this case in Mentor, Ohio, which I don't have the exact date on this one. It's mid-1960s. But this cigar-shaped object came and hovered over the theater for about a half an hour, to the point where everyone in the audience was watching it and not the movie. People started to get really nervous. They went to the projection booth and basically told them to shut down the movie. We don't want them. They're going to see us. Everyone's watching this anyway. So they shut down the movie. And this is when things got spectacular, because this cigar-shaped object, which was horizontal, turned vertical, and out came one disc, followed by another, boom, 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 till there were 10. Came out and put on a show. Well, I mean, I don't know how else to put it. They were darting all over around, did this for about 15 minutes, at which point they lined up in a column like obedient little school children and doink, 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 went back into this, cigar-shaped object, which was still vertical, which then went horizontal, and off it went. So this is, there's case after case where they're doing this kind of what researchers call a display. But
that sounds like the movie Arrival, doesn't it?
Right? I thought of that. There's some cases where the Air Force does show up and chase these objects away. That's pretty rare. That does happen. I do think the government's aware of it in some of these cases.
Now, can we stay on cigar shape for a second? You've been researching for I've never seen a cigar-shaped craft. And I often wonder, so I'm going to ask you about this. One, how often it happens. And when I think of, this is a pen, I'm holding up a pen. So when I hear cigar-shaped, I'm picturing something shaped like this. Something in my mind is saying, are people seeing a saucer from the side, or are they seeing it in 3D? So it is a cigar shaped. What do you think is going on?
I think you hit it right on the head. I think they're probably saucer shaped, or frankly, even half disc shaped, more manta ray shaped.
Right.
But let's face it, these objects can change shape. So it can be a little bit hard to pin down. And if you look at all the drawings that were even submitted to just Blue Book alone, but all the witness drawings, and there's a lot of them out there. There's a fantastic variation of shapes. But football shaped is not uncommon. Spherical, egg shaped, saucer shaped, cigar shaped. I have to believe that some of these are accurately reported. But if you look at reports of saucer-shaped craft from the side, yeah, it looks like a cigar. And there are a good number of cases where people thought it was a cigar shape, and then it comes down and you see it's a saucer.
Right.
So
have you seen a cigar shaped craft?
Me personally, no. I sure have.
No, I'm waiting for that, and I haven't seen. I've seen crazy stuff, but I haven't seen like a TR-3B. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen like a low flying black triangle. I saw one high. I haven't seen a boomerang, but I've seen just about everything else. I've seen saucers. I was the two good saucer sightings that I had. One was in Sedona. And I go to Sedona. I'm with my friend Adrian, and we hook up with a friend of mine, a Skywatcher, a tour. He's a tour guide, and so we go to the top of the airfield, which is on the top of a hill. And so when you go up to the airport there, you're looking at Sedona below. Right. And we're at the edge of this cliff. We just get there. Preston, I swear on all that I love. We just get there. I'm unpacking my stuff. I've got night vision and I've got a backpack, and we just get out of the cars. I'm just kind of looking around. It's beautiful. And right at that moment, from behind the airport, is this white, it's a disc. It's glowing. It's low, and it's flying right over us. And I'm like, no, get out. Right? Watch this thing just go right over us and then fly over Sedona and then like over the hill behind the trees. I was like, what? No way. And it was like the craziest thing. It's the only way I can describe it was a flying saucer. That's what it was.
I'm pretty sure that these guys know exactly what they're doing, the ETs. I do think that's what we're dealing with here. But when someone has a sighting, they know it. They're showing themselves off on purpose. And they know when people are going out there looking for them. I've done a bunch of CE5s. I've been part of groups that do that. And often they would come right when we arrive or right when we're leaving. There's a weird timing aspect to it. So, yeah, I think they know exactly what they're doing. I really do.
Yeah, it's when I like the way that you say they're putting on a show, because if they are, and which they are, right? They know about us. They know our habits. They've been studying us for thousands of years, right? Millions of years. They probably know exactly what a drive-in theater is. They know what we're doing there. They're an advanced civilization, so they've already gone through comedy and music and theater. They have evolved. They understand, right? They know what they're doing, and then they turn around and put on a show for those that are at the theater there, the drive-in theater, to watch the movie. It makes perfect sense. I love this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I put out this book, and then I met this contactee by the name of Dolly Safran, who I ended up writing a full book on. She's a fully conscious contactee who's had major contact. And I asked her about this because she's kind of become my go-to gal for when I have questions. They literally taught her how to pilot the craft. She's for real. She's got photographs. She's got corroborating evidence, witnesses. So I asked her about this. I'm like, have you ever heard of this? Have you ever been on board when they did this? And she says, well, actually, yeah, twice. Once in, let me see, I think it was in Florida, once somewhere in the Midwest. And yeah, that's what they're doing. They are putting on a publicity campaign. They're announcing their presence. This is the reason. I speculate it's for eventually open official contact, because I think at some point that is inevitable. But this is absolutely a thing. Can I tell you my favorite case of all times?
Let's go.
Oh my God, this guy, because a lot of these I found in literature, but this guy I interviewed firsthand. I was able to trace a minority of these cases, but certainly some of them. And this one occurred at the South Hutch Theater in South Hutchinson, Kansas, to a gentleman by the name of Pat Mitchell. And man, oh man, this is summer of 1966. He goes there with his friend to watch a James Bond movie. And it's funny, there's a weird timing to these sightings. It's often in the very beginning or during an intermission or right in the climax of the movie. And that's when this happened. It's a great movie. He doesn't remember which James Bond flick it was. But his friend turns to him and says, "Do you see that light?" And of course he did, because it was off in the distance coming towards the theater. They're facing the screen and it's in front of them. And very quickly, over a minute or two, approaches the theater. And just like in the Claudia Blasios case at Paramount Theater, it stops right to the right of the screen, below the level of the top of the screen. Now, mind you, this screen is 52 feet wide and 120 feet high. So it's below that level, and it's about half the screen or so. It's estimating 30 feet. Metallic disc covered with beautiful colored lights, and sits there for 5, 10 minutes. Everyone's getting out of their car. They're looking at it. There's no panic. It's just sitting there watching them watch it. And everyone's talking, "Oh, it's a flying saucer. Can you believe this?" Then this object goes behind the screen. It's completely occluded from view at this point. Comes out on the other side, raises up about 50 feet. So it's right above the screen, stays there for another 5 minutes. And here's where I just know this is a show. You're doing this on purpose. Because then this disc goes around the theater in its entirety. Does one complete rotation, stops again, and then slowly goes over the exit road onto the street lining the theater and starts traveling right above the road at about 10 miles an hour. So at this point, everyone clears the theater. A convoy of, he says, could have been anywhere to about 50 cars. Start following this thing out. He was in the middle of the theater, so he didn't get to be the first one out. But he was right in the center of this huge convoy of about 50 cars traveling down this road in South Hutchinson, Kansas, for another 10 minutes or so, 6 miles out of town, where this object now stops again, pulls off to the side of the road and hovers. Now it's about 200 feet up. And everyone stopped in the middle of the road watching this thing until finally it takes off straight up. It's a tiny little dot, star-like object in the sky, and disappears off into the distance into outer space. Now, at this point, everyone's talking, they're going crazy. There's a local newspaper. He worked for the newspaper as a photographer. Pat Mitchell did. Amateur, but submit photos. And he's like, "Well, I'm going to report it." And everyone's all, "Well, I'm going to report it." And he saw so many people going there, he decided, you know what? It's being reported. I'm just going to read the article the next day, which didn't come out. And it didn't come out the next day after that. So after a couple of more days, he goes into the newspaper office because he knows these people. He says, "What about the South Hatch, the UFO sighting?" And he said, "They completely played dumb." And he's like, "I know you know. I know the people who went in there. It's the buzz of the town. We're all talking about this. What's going on?" Still played completely dumb. And finally, he got someone, an insider, who said, "Listen, we had military people show up. The story was quashed. You're not to talk about this." And that's where it ended. So it's a crazy case. But he says it affected him for the rest of his life. And he would tell his children, he thought, "It's crazy. Dad is talking about his UFO sighting at the drive-in again."
Right. Preston, this is what is crazy to me. I've had more than a few sightings with mutual friends of ours. 2 of them with Steve Murillo, by the way, who's a very close mutual friend of ours, where these objects go from Earth in front of us and then up and turn into a star and then shoot off into space. And this is what, if you don't see the part, like in this case, the drive-in, or with Steve and I and our friends, if you're not there for the event at the start of the event, the end of the event, it's just a star in the sky. So it makes me wonder all the time. And when you're looking up at how many of what we think are stars,
Yep.
right? It's not going to catch your attention, and I've seen it happen with my own eyes. And I just stop and I just wonder to myself, how many of those stars up there right now are objects, and it's and you just don't know. If you look up at the sky and you're looking at the stars, what are you looking at? Stars, right? But you didn't see the event at the drive-in first, right? Anybody else after the fact, after the event, there's nothing for them to see. It's only stars in the sky. That's the incredible part. We have no idea what's really going on up above us.
Yeah, I heard about a case where a guy was chased on the road, drove into a gas station. The object goes straight up, mimics a star. He brings everyone out. He's like, that thing is following me. And they're like, that's a star. He's
Right.
Like, no, keep watching it. It didn't move. So finally he had to continue his journey. Thing drops down and chases him down the road again. So yeah.
you know Alex Mistretta, right? So and Steve Murillo, we're standing out on this patio, and this is what happens. And I think it was Mistretta. It might have been Steve. But somebody says, wouldn't it be cool? We're out in the desert. Wouldn't it be cool if we saw a UFO right now? And it was like 11 o'clock at night. We were pizza and beer and that kind of stuff. And Preston, at that moment, from out in the desert, I'm talking about desert. There's no houses. There's nothing. This white ball goes straight up. It lasted about 1 second, maybe 2. It was weird too, because it was just a ball. There wasn't like a streak of light, or you know what I mean, or flames, and nothing. It was just a white ball, but and it was on cue. But anyway, so we're looking up, and there it was. It's just a dot in the sky. So it's just like what you're saying. If we would have pointed that out to somebody, you see that? No, it's a star. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about, so it appears to me that there is some similarities to what is going on in the schools around the world too, as well. And those seem to be theatrical performances too, right? Where you are showing yourself to a large group of people. Do you see the same connection there?
I do. These both share a number of really honest to God similarities, with really the only difference being schoolyard encounters are quite a bit more dramatic because these are daylight encounters, but they are very widely viewed, perhaps not widely viewed as the drive-in theater encounters. It's also with children, but I analyzed all the cases and I found 100 all across the world. I mean, from 1950 onwards, just the same exact pattern. But they come down, they target the school, they hover over it at an average height of about 100 to 200 feet. But in 1/3, get this is shocking to me, 1/3 of these cases at schoolyards, and this is from the 100 I analyzed, and it's now closer to 200, 1/3, these objects will land next to the school and or humanoids will come out. Half of these cases are at elementary schools. Junior high, high schools, some at colleges, but half are at primary schools, elementary schools, our youngest kids. Daylight encounters almost exclusively, very widely viewed. Average is about 40 kids, but there was a case in Maranui, New Zealand, where 400 students saw it, and teachers in half of these cases. It's not just kids, but it's clearly a case of schools being targeted is perhaps not the best word, but because it does have negative connotations. But that's absolutely what they're doing. They're coming down. The Westall High School case.
Okay, so I was just going to bring that up. We've got Westall in 1966, right, in Australia. We've got Ariel in Africa. And those are the two cases, right? And those are the two cases that everybody talks about. But you just said that you've got between 1 and 200 cases of contact at schools.
Yeah, and that's a conservative estimate because I'm getting more and more and more. It's insane. I'm telling you, this is unbelievable. This knocked my socks off when I started uncovering this because I had a few cases myself, but it wasn't until Ariel Elementary School that case really took off in the media that I started to, like, gosh, there was that Westall High School case, which was in April of 1966.
Right.
What's really interesting is 1 year to the day, April 1967, I think it was 21st or somewhere around there, Opelika, Florida, Crestview Elementary School had an almost identical incident as Westall. And did you know, this is crazy, 2 weeks before Westall was one of the most famous schoolyard incidents of all times, Hillsdale College, one that basically got Hynek out of Project Blue Book. And he's like, that was his low point of his career, he said, when he mentioned swamp gas, simply raising it as a possible explanation. He didn't say it was, and the media crucified him. But that case involved over 100 witnesses, students, school officials, police officers, and a lot of people don't know this, but it lasted for 2 hours and actually landed next to the school at one point. It took off when all the students started running towards it. But that's another case. And when that happened, Jim and Coral Lorenzen of APRO said, we've got an awful lot of these schoolyard encounters. Something is going on here. John Keel said the same thing. And Raymond Fowler, very well-known researcher, said that he had at that point, this was, March, it was in March, the Hillsdale case, 2 weeks before Westall. But Raymond Fowler says he had 15 cases that year so far. 8 of them had occurred at schoolyards, over schools. So researchers recognized early on this was a thing. But somehow, no one ever fully connected the dots that this was still going on. Oh, man. I mean, there are some crazy cases of this kind.
Do you think that even back then, because today we protect our children, we don't talk about, we don't. That's it. That's a subject that we just don't go into, and for good reason. Was that same stigma attached to our children back then, where these cases weren't as publicized because they involved children?
100%. Yeah, there's a number of cases where that comes up, where kids will come home and say, guess what I saw? I mean, there was one in Scotland at Elder Park Elementary School.
That's a big one.
Yeah, a bunch of kids saw it, and no one was paying attention to them, even though some adults were there. But the next day, of course, it turned out that this object, which had hovered right over the school for 10 minutes, spinning very slowly and then took off, was seen by all these people throughout Glasgow, Scotland.
That's right.
And
when you see, all the kids showing their pictures, right, and they've all drawn the same things, you have to scratch your head. I had, okay. Man, it's about you. It's not about me. But check this out. When this was 1972, 1973, right in there, I'm crossing the street from our apartment building to our elementary school, Clearview Elementary in Waukegan, Illinois. And
hey, that's where I'm from.
Really?
Yeah, I'm from Waukegan.
I was born at Great Lakes Naval Station.
I was born in Chicago, actually, but yeah, we grew up in Waukegan.
Wow. Okay. So check this out. This is at Clearview Elementary in Waukegan. And I'm going to the playground. All of my friends are there, and I'm going to go hang out with my friends. And something catches my eye, and I look up, and I see the Hindenburg. Listen to me. The Hindenburg and the engines, the ribs. It's a Zeppelin, and it's low. And it's flying over the schoolyard, and I'm like, wow! And I run after it, and I'm underneath this thing for a good few minutes, running across the playground until it disappeared. But I saw people in the gondola. Right, it was low, and I drew pictures of it. And so years later, many years later, I'm sitting. Working on the show, and that memory pops in my head. It was a couple of years ago, and I went, "Oh yeah, that's right." I wonder what Zeppelin was over Chicago in 1972. So I Google it. I just wanted to know what it was. Right? Was it the United States Navy? We know about the Los Angeles and the Akron and the Ohio. You know, these different airships that the U.S. Navy had. So I look it up, and guess what I find? There has been no rigid Zeppelin airships in the world since 1937, right? I was like, what? No, I saw it over my school. And so I read through all of this, and I find out that the Akron, the Ohio, and the Los Angeles, one crashed. The other two were dismantled and destroyed after the Hindenburg. After the Hindenburg crash in New Jersey, that was it. There were the Goodyear blimp, right? But not what I saw. And it just, what was it? I don't know.
Screen memory that happened.
I don't know. Vortex, time warp, but it was over Clearview Elementary School in Waukegan, Illinois.
Crazy.
Yep. Yeah. I don't have an. It's crazy. Here's the thing, Preston. If I was somebody contacting you, and I reach out to you, and I tell you this story. That's crazy town. What do you think? You don't know me, right? But you get this story like this. What goes through your mind?
Well, is it a blimp or not? You know, I would get a very concise description, and I would do exactly what you did. I'd start doing my research. I would, of course, scour the databases, see if there's any other reports, because that does sometimes happen. But, you know, I'm not going to completely discount it, because I do know that people's can have what we call a screen memory. And remembered as a plan. I've got several cases of this in the schoolyard book where one person thought it was a plane, and the other person's like, no, that's not what we saw at all. That was not a plane. And people will just see things differently. So... yeah, I mean, I would dig in deep and try to.
Yeah, I looked at this it was a good 5 minutes. It was slow. It was low. It was right there. And we've all seen the Goodyear blimp. And at that age, which I would have been about 10 years old, I knew every airplane. I knew every helicopter. I knew every astronaut by name. I knew every rocket, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. I knew that was my world. And I can tell you, if it was a Goodyear blimp, I would have said, wow, check it out. It's the Goodyear blimp.
Because well, if I had a gondola, I do wonder about that, because that is pretty standard for a Zeppelin type craft.
It was huge. It was huge. Engines down the side. Just cruising right over. low. Yeah. I got a really, it was crazy. And so, like I said, when I went to go, I thought I was going to see something like U.S. Navy Los Angeles visits the Chicago Bears football game in 1970. I was going to see something like that. But to read that there were none in the world since 1937, 1938, anywhere that
I remember about the whole airship wave of the 1890s and early 1900s. So it kind of reminds me of that in a way.
Somebody just said, I can't find Spartanburg. Greenville, Spartanburg. 2 cities they touch. My parents used to live there. Yeah, I used to land at that airport. Somebody just said, hey, it's South Carolina, not North Carolina. Yeah, it's South, right? Spartanburg's in South Carolina. I don't think it's North Carolina. I can't remember. It's one of the two. But what do you think? Is it because kids haven't gone through the programming yet? Right? They haven't been programmed as an adult like you and I.
Yeah. That's what I love about these cases. I mean, because these are people who don't have a belief system regarding UFOs. People are like, children are not great witnesses. I beg to differ, because they're very transparent in their thinking, and they are very good witnesses, especially when you've got a group of them. And most of these kids have never even heard of UFOs. They don't overlay anything on their experience. They're just telling you what they saw.
Right.
And it's amazing to hear these cases. God, one of my favorite cases occurred at Whitsitt Elementary School on October 27, 1955, because these objects came over the school and they released huge volumes of what we call angel hair, which, as you know, is that spider web kind of wispy cotton candy-like substance. But it was inches deep on the playground. This was witnessed by the school principal, who turned out to be a World War II pilot, and very experienced with aircraft. And it's just all over the school. He's collecting samples of it, which is amazing, because generally angel hair dissolves very quickly. He saw one student pick up some of this and start to put it in his mouth. He ran up to him like, don't eat that, too late. This kid put it in his mouth and quickly spit it out. He said it tasted bad. It was very salty and bitter. But he ended up collecting a sample of this, which did remain in this container, and he sent it off to Burlington Labs, who analyzed it, and they said, well, this isn't spider webs, if that's what you think it is. It's far too regular in its strands. There's no evidence of spiders, but we don't know what else it could be. You should send it to a biologist. And he did. And the biologist said, this is not spider webs, whatever this is. Angel hair has been analyzed in other cases, and they know it's composed of boron and other substances. But in this case, he says his sample at that point disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But it's a great case, witnessed by there's still living witnesses to this case, actually. 62 students, I think, were on the playground who saw this. Right. And it's so interesting, because it was 1 year and 5 days after another case at Jerome Elementary School, in Marysville, Ohio, which also volumes of angel hair, which they collected. They sent to the local Air Force base. Never heard back from them. Principal saw it in that case too. So you can't tell me these aren't displays, when these objects are putting on a show for these kids. And I think it's the same thing. It's a publicity. It's a grassroots publicity campaign, because they went to our governments, the ETs, and said, be truthful, be transparent. They didn't. And they're going to the people directly. This is my theory, my assessment, just based on the actual firsthand cases. But there's so many of them. There's so many.
Wow, I find it fascinating, and it's so underreported. I mean, even Westall and Ariel, which have had great documentaries done. Thank goodness that we've got the documented stuff that we have from both of those cases, but really, honestly, underreported.
Vastly.
Right. Very much so. And when you have, John Mack, thank goodness that he went there and shot everything on film with cameras and documented Ariel like he did. But the and the witnesses are still with us today. But that case and the same thing with Australia in 1966, where you have something as big as that with that many witnesses, that should be talked about like Roswell. That should be talked about like Rendlesham. That should be talked about like Betty and Barney Hill. And they're underreported cases. It's fascinating to me.
It's crazy. And I was able to trace some personally. One of my favorite was a lady I interviewed, Melody Korn, who had an experience at Point Pleasant Elementary School, literally the same month as the Hillsdale College. Not too far away. This was Missouri, I think. And she and 6 friends decided they weren't going to play foursquare with the other kids, but were going to play tag on the far end of the school, elementary school, and ran over there and saw these little footprints on the ground and were following them and tracking them, and saw over in the field next to the school where there were trees, this bright light. And they're thinking ice cream truck. So they go running off the school grounds. They're not supposed to do that, but they did it, kids being kids, and run up to this landed saucer with a little ET. She contacted me because she wanted me to tell her if had anyone else seen an ET of this description. And I had to say no, because she described this very muscular being, short, wearing a jumpsuit with an ape-like face. And they went right up to it, this row of 6 kids. And it backed up into the craft, which was it was going inside. And at which point, Mrs. Ohlendorf, the teacher, screams behind them, grabs them, says, "Get back into the class right now," ushers them into the class. Now, at this point, everyone's seeing this thing because you can see it plainly through the trees there. And they are all rushed into the classroom. They're rushed to the door or the windows. And so Miss Ohlendorf is closing the shutters as fast as she can and calling for the principal and the other teachers. And the kids are out of control. And finally, they usher all the kids into the gymnasium just to stop them from seeing this thing. They're trying to cover it up as it's happening and can't do it, obviously. But at some point, this craft, one of the kids shouts out, "There it goes," because there were windows in the gymnasium high up. But they watched this craft dart off, and they closed the school down for the day. They sent everyone home, and it was the talk of the school for months, much to the chagrin of the teachers.
Wow. Amazing case. What's your next book about? What are you working on now?
I'm working on a sequel to Symmetry about Dolly Safran and her amazing experiences. I'm working on volume 5 of my Not From Here series, all about really unusual outlying cases of UFOs over prisons and graveyards and mines and phone calls from ETs and just weird cases that don't get a lot of attention.
You're the best, Preston. You're the best. I miss you, brother, and I can't wait to see you again. And just thank you for everything. What a sensational show and conversation tonight. Thank you so much. And everybody, Preston's links are below, and you can go and find his books everywhere. And 31, 32, 33, and 34 about to get released. Right out, Preston. Thank you so much, my brother. Be safe out there.
Thank you very much, Jimmy.
You're the best. Preston Dennett. And again, his links are below. Head over. What a conversation tonight. What a perfect show. And thank you so much, Preston. It was, that's the thing. Drive-in theaters. Yeah. They are definitely putting on a show for us. Thank you so much, Preston. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, John on Side. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Thank you to Dennis, and thank you, Kevin. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, I want everybody to be safe. Go back, Lee Tappy.